I survived domestic abuse, but my family never believed me. Asheville, North Carolina is the kind of place people describe with soft words: peaceful, artsy, calming. Visitors come for the Blue Ridge Mountains, the small cafes tucked between bookshops, the murals that bloom on brick walls. People fall in love with Asheville because it looks like healing. But I didn't move here to heal. I moved here to hide. My name is Hannah Mercer, and the story I'm about to tell still feels unreal, even though I lived every minute of it. People think abuse always looks like bruises and shouting. They think you can see it from the outside. They think they'd recognize it. But what happens when nobody recognizes it? Not your friends, not your community, not even your family. Here's something the movies don't teach you. Sometimes the most dangerous place for a survivor isn't the relationship they escaped. It's the people who don't believe the story. I met Ryan when I was 21, young enough to mistake attention for affection, intensity for love. He was warm, funny, confident in a way that made everyone around him feel chosen. He worked as an EMT, which meant he had the hero glow people attach to uniforms. Everyone trusted him before he opened his mouth. And that's how abusers thrive. They become the people others automatically defend. Our relationship moved fast, too fast. Within 3 months, he'd moved into my tiny apartment. Within 6, we were talking marriage. I mistook speed for excitement. If you're listening, you probably recognize this moment, the part of the story where you want to reach in and whisper, "Slow down. Look closer. Something's off." I wish I could whisper it to the younger me. The first red flag was so small, I didn't see it until years later. I was folding laundry one night when he walked in and said, "You don't need to wear skirts like that anymore. You look better in jeans." Just a comment, just an opinion. Then it became, "Don't talk to him. I don't like his energy. Don't post that picture. You look desperate. Don't go out with them. They don't deserve you." Every "don't" was wrapped in compliments, concern, or a playful smirk. That's how control slips in, disguised as care. A month later, he asked my phone password. "Just in case," he said. "Emergencies, you know." It felt reasonable, except he started checking my messages every night, then every few hours, then in front of me, scrolling while I sat silent beside him like a child, waiting for a test result. Still, I didn't call it abuse, because he never yelled, never hit me, never threatened me. You don't realize you're being caged when the bars are made of compliments. When things finally turned physical, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a Hollywood explosion. It was a quiet morning, sunlight on the counter, pancakes cooling next to a bottle of syrup. He accused me of deleting a message. I hadn't. "You're lying," he said, voice flat. "I'm not," I replied, tired and confused. Then, without raising his voice, he grabbed my wrist hard enough that my coffee sloshed onto the floor, hard enough that my skin heated under his fingers, hard enough that something deep in my chest finally whispered, "This is not love." But here's the thing. Survivors don't leave the first time. We rationalize. We minimize. We blame stress, timing, mood, anything but the truth. When my wrist started bruising that afternoon, he kissed it gently and said, "I'm sorry, baby. You scared me. You scared me." Those words became the script that followed every incident, and I believed them. 3 months later, he shoved me for the first time. 6 months later, he slapped me. 9 months later, he pinned me to the wall hard enough to make my teeth rattle. And every single time, he cried. Every single time, he promised. Every single time, he said the same thing. I only react like this because I love you so much. If you don't push me, I won't lose control. Let me tell you something plainly, because this is the part that people in the comments always debate. Love doesn't look like fear, and fear doesn't come from nowhere. If someone justifies their violence with love, they mean control. But back then, I clung to hope the way drowning people cling to anything that floats. When I finally told my family what was happening, I expected shock, concern, rescue. I got none of those. My mother's first words were, "Ryan? Sweet, caring Ryan? I don't think so." My father said, "You've always been dramatic. Maybe you misunderstood the situation." My sister rolled her eyes and said, "You just want attention. You're so sensitive." It was like telling a room full of people that a house was on fire and having them comment on how nice the paint looked. I stood there, bruised wrist hidden under my sleeve, heart pounding in humiliation, realizing the worst truth of my life. They believed him more than they believed me. Why? Because he was charming, because he was stable, because he was the kind of man families imagine bringing to Thanksgiving. I left that conversation feeling smaller than I'd ever felt. Silenced, dismissed, alone. People think abuse isolates you because abusers push others away. Sometimes the truth is uglier. It isolates you because when you finally speak, no one listens. The night I left was the closest I've ever come to dying. If you're watching this story unfold, this is where the atmosphere tightens, where even the distracted listener suddenly starts paying attention. Because near-death moments always sharpen a narrative. It was raining. Not the gentle kind, the sideways kind that hits windows like thrown gravel. We'd argued earlier about something trivial. My tone, maybe. My expression. My breathing. With abusers, the trigger changes daily. He paced the living room like a storm wearing human skin. "You think you can embarrass me?" he said quietly. Quiet, always quiet. The quieter he was, the more danger filled the air. He cornered me in the kitchen. My back hit the counter. His hands gripped my arms hard enough to numb them. I remember thinking, he's going to kill me and tell my family I provoked him, and they'll believe him. When he pushed me, I slipped on water from the leaking window and hit the tile so hard I saw stars. Then something inside me snapped. The part that wanted to live finally screamed louder than the part that wanted to be loved. I grabbed my keys and ran. Barefoot. Bruised. Shaking so violently I could barely turn the ignition. I drove straight out of town with the adrenaline of a hunted animal. And I didn't stop until I hit Asheville. I rented a studio apartment the size of a closet. I slept with the lights on for 3 months. I checked the door lock 7 times every night. But I survived. And survival is a muscle. It gets stronger every time you use it. I blocked his number. Changed mine. Filed a police report when I finally had enough courage. Went to therapy. Learned how to breathe again without flinching. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. Because when people don't believe your abuse, they rewrite your escape as your flaw. 3 weeks after I left, my mother called. "Hannah," she said, "Ryan stopped by." My stomach dropped. "He's devastated," she continued.
He said you left without explanation. He said you'd been unstable lately. Unstable. There it was. The story he built and the story they swallowed. What did you tell him? I asked. He said, I told him we'd pray for you, she said gently, as if delivering kindness, and that we hope you come to your senses. Come to my senses. I hung up the phone and cried harder than I cried the night I fled. Because escaping abuse is painful, but escaping disbelief, that's a whole different war. So I started over, alone, scared, determined. I took a job at a small art shop downtown, started hiking the Blue Ridge trails every morning to quiet my mind. Built a life in a city where people didn't know I used to apologize for breathing too loudly. But trauma doesn't disappear when you drive away from it. It follows you like a shadow, waiting for the moment you think you're safe to crawl up your spine and whisper, "Remember me?" And I did, every day. But something else was coming, something I didn't expect. Because just when I thought the past had stopped reaching for me, my family showed up at my door. Not for an apology, not for understanding. No, they came to deliver a message, one that made me realize the most painful betrayal wasn't his violence. It was their refusal to see it. And in part 2, that truth starts tearing the story open.
When I opened the door and saw my family standing on the porch of my tiny Asheville studio, it felt like the universe had hit a pause button. For a second, none of us moved. Not me, barefoot in sweatpants, hair unbrushed, mug of herbal tea in my hand. Not them. A triangle of familiar faces wearing the same expression. Concern. But not the right kind. This wasn't, "Are you safe?" concern. This was, "You made things awkward and we're here to fix it." My mother spoke first. "Oh, Hannah," she said, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. "It smells like incense in here. That's different." My sister followed, arms crossed, assessing the apartment as if she were judging a rental listing. My father came last, standing in the doorway like he wanted to flee but didn't know how to say it. I shut the door and braced myself. When survivors talk about bracing, people sometimes imagine it's physical, like flinching. But it's not just that. It's emotional bracing, intellectual bracing, spiritual bracing. Because I already knew why they were here. I just hoped I was wrong. My mother perched on my couch, hands folded as if in prayer. "Oh, Hannah," she said, delicately, "we were all talking, and we think you owe Ryan an apology." The mug slipped in my hand. Tea splashed onto my wrist, burning my skin. I what?" I whispered. "He came by to speak with us," my father added, too voiced, too calm. "He's hurt. Confused. He said you left without warning, and he's worried you're spiraling." There it was. The word abusers love to plant in people's minds. Spiraling. I set my mug down slowly. "I left because he put his hands on me," I said quietly, repeatedly. My sister rolled her eyes so hard I could hear the dismissiveness in the motion. "Oh my God, Hannah. Everyone argues. You're not the only person who's ever been shoved during a fight." "It wasn't a shove," I snapped. "It was abuse." She lifted her eyebrows like she'd just heard something dramatic, but unbelievable. "Do you have proof?" she asked. That question, that's the moment every survivor in the audience just flinched. Because proof is rarely photographic. It's rarely recorded. It's rarely captured in time. Abusers are strategic. They hurt you where sleeves can hide the marks, where pillows soften the impact, where walls don't bruise visibly. My mother reached for my hand. "Honey," she said, "Ryan told us he never hit you. He said he grabbed your arms once when you were having one of your episodes." I pulled my hand away. "Episodes?" I repeated. She winced. That was the wrong word, and she knew it. "You know how emotional you get," my father said, stepping in to fix the sentence she'd just broken. I stared at them one by one. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "I told you I left because I was being abused, and your first reaction was to go talk to the man who abused me?" "We wanted his side of the story," my sister said, as if fairness was the issue. "His side?" I whispered. "What about my side?" Silence. Not thoughtful silence, accusing silence. The kind that says, if your story were true, wouldn't you sound calmer? The conversation spiraled from there. "But he's such a good man. He's devastated, Hannah. Are you sure you didn't misinterpret? Maybe you triggered him. Maybe you need help. He's worried sick about you." Every sentence tightened around me like a rope. Every look said the same thing. We don't believe you. When people don't believe a survivor, it doesn't just invalidate the experience. It compounds the trauma. It tells you your pain isn't real unless someone else approves it. Finally, I stood up and said, "I need you to leave." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Hannah, please, don't make this harder than it has to be." "It's already hard," I said. "You're making it impossible." My sister scoffed. "You're overreacting, like always." But my father, he hesitated. He looked at me with something almost like recognition. Almost. Then it flickered away. "Hannah," he said gently, "we just want to help." "Then believe me," I whispered. "Just once. Believe me." He didn't answer, and that was the answer. I opened the door and stood there in silence until they shuffled out. My mother hugged herself. My father kept his eyes on the floor. My sister's glare was sharp enough to cut air. My mother turned back at the last second. "Ryan is willing to forgive you," she said. "Forgive me. Forgive me." I closed the door so quietly it felt like an act of mercy. Then I locked every bolt, collapsed onto the couch, shook until my teeth clicked. You would think escaping the relationship was the hardest part. You would be wrong. 3 days after that visit, something else happened, something that changed the tone of everything that followed. I was walking home from work at the art shop, cutting through a quiet side street, when I realized I was being followed. Footsteps. Slow, measured, deliberate. At first, I brushed it off. Downtown Asheville has plenty of pedestrians. But when I slowed down, the steps slowed. When I sped up, they sped up. My heart pounded. I slipped my phone out of my pocket and angled it so I could see behind me in the screen's reflection. Someone in a gray hoodie, tall, steady stride, hands tucked in pockets like they had nowhere else to be. I walked faster. He matched my pace. I turned the corner. He turned the corner. My chest tightened. When I heard him whisper my name, I nearly vomited. "Hannah?" The voice wasn't deep. It wasn't rough. It was soft. Soft in a way that made my skin crawl. I spun around slowly. It wasn't Ryan. It was my sister. Her hood was pulled low, but her smirk was unmistakable.
"What are you doing here?" I demanded, pulse racing. She shrugged. "Checking up on you." "At night. In an alley." "You wouldn't answer our calls," she said casually. "Thought I'd try in person." I stared at her, stunned. "You followed me?" I said. She shrugged again. "It's not weird unless you make it weird." "It is weird," I snapped. "You scared me." She stepped closer, and I took a step back. My reaction made her pause. "What? You think I'd hurt you?" she asked. Her tone wasn't hurt. It was offended. "I don't know what you do anymore," I whispered. She crossed her arms. "Ryan said you get paranoid when you're overwhelmed." There it was again, his narrative falling from her lips like gospel. When abusers can't reach you directly, they recruit people who can. She looked me up and down. "You look rough." No wonder he's worried. Worried. A chill rolled down my spine. "He told me where I work, didn't he?" I asked. She didn't answer. "You need to stop this," she said instead. "Come home, work things out, apologize. He said he'll even go to therapy if that's what you need." I stared at her. Therapy. The word dangled in front of me like bait.
Let me be clear, she continued. If you keep acting unstable, people are going to stop trying to help. A warning, a threat, a manipulation. She turned around and walked away without waiting for my reply. I stood frozen, her words replaying in my head like a broken recording. Unstable, paranoid, apologize, forgive you. He had fed her the exact language he once fed me. After that, I changed my routine, took different streets, kept pepper spray in my coat pocket, closed the shop with coworkers instead of alone. But no amount of caution prepares you for the next betrayal. Because when my sister failed to convince me, Ryan tried a different tactic. He filed a missing person report against me. I found out when 2 Asheville police officers knocked on my door one morning. "Ma'am," one said, "we've received a report that your partner believes you're mentally unstable and missing from home." My heart stopped. "That man isn't my partner," I said. "I left him." "We don't have that on file," the officer replied. "He claims you're having a breakdown and may be a danger to yourself." I felt sick. He was trying to paint me as mentally unstable, trying to force police involvement, trying to drag me back into the narrative, trying to flip the script entirely. "This is harassment," I said. "He abused me. I fled." The officers exchanged a look. One asked carefully, "Do you have a restraining order?" "No," I said quietly. "Not yet." They nodded, explained my options, filed the incident, left. I stood there alone, shaking uncontrollably. This is the moment in the story where people watching in silence suddenly sit up straighter. Because this is where abuse becomes a maze. He wasn't just trying to reach me physically, he was trying to reach my credibility, destroy it, warp it, rewrite it. And my own family was feeding his version of the story. I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just surviving an abuser. I was surviving a system built to protect him. And the next step I took would decide everything. Because what happened next, in part 3, is when this story stops being about escape and starts being about fighting back. The morning the police left my doorstep, I sat on the hardwood floor of my studio apartment and stared at the wall for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just absorbing something I hadn't fully understood until that exact moment. Ryan wasn't trying to get me back. He was trying to claim me,
like property returning home after running away. There's a point in every survivor's story where the audience sees the shift, where the fear stops being a quiet undertone and becomes a living thing in the room. This was that moment for me. He had involved the police, used my family, followed me with his words, even though he couldn't reach me physically. He was constructing a narrative, a powerful one. And the worst part, I knew exactly how believable he could sound when he wanted to. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the officer's words. "Do you have a restraining order?" No, I didn't. Why? Because filing one requires proof, and proof requires bruises, messages, recordings, something measurable. Not "he grabbed me once" or "he controls me" or "I feel unsafe." Feelings don't win cases. Patterns do. But patterns take time to prove. The next morning, I made an appointment with a local victims advocacy center, a tiny white building wedged between a florist and a thrift shop, the kind of place people don't notice until they need it desperately. Inside, a woman named Laura greeted me. She looked like someone who had seen too much pain and still chose hope every day. "What brought you in?" she asked gently. I told her everything. Not the edited version, not the polite version, the whole truth. She didn't interrupt, didn't question, didn't look shocked. She simply nodded, took notes, and asked the kind of questions only professionals know to ask. "Hannah, what you're describing is a clear pattern of coercive control, emotional violence, and escalating physical harm." Hearing those words spoken so plainly made my chest tighten. Finally, someone who didn't look at me like I was imagining things. "What do I do?" I whispered. "First," she said, "you document everything. All contact, all incidents, all conversations. Save text, record voicemails, keep copies of emails. If you remember old moments, write them down." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were forms, checklists, resources. "And second," she added, "you consider filing for a restraining order. Even without physical evidence, your testimony matters." My hand shook as I took the folder. "Third," she said quietly, "you stop trying to make your family believe you." I looked up sharply. She held my gaze with the steady confidence of someone who'd seen this pattern 1,000 times. Validation from the wrong people will keep you trapped. Sometimes the people closest to us are the least capable of seeing the truth. I wiped my face with my sleeve. "You're not alone," she added. "Not anymore." That sentence, I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it. For a few days, things were quiet, too quiet. And anyone who's been in a situation like this knows that quiet isn't safety. Quiet is stage setting. Quiet means they're preparing something. It came on a Thursday. I was at work arranging handmade earrings on a wooden display rack when my phone buzzed with a notification from a number I didn't recognize. A text message. "We need to talk. Please." My breath caught. It was him. I blocked the number immediately. 2 hours later, a voicemail dropped into my inbox. I didn't listen. Not then. I forced myself through the rest of my shift, hands trembling every time the shop bell jingled. That night, sitting on my couch with the lights dimmed, I finally pressed play on the voicemail. His voice came through low, soft, painfully familiar. "Hannah, I don't know what's going on. Your family said you're still upset. I know we've had disagreements, but you disappearing like this, it's not normal. I'm worried about you. Please let me help. I forgive you for everything. Just call me back." Forgive me. There it was again. That word had become his weapon. But underneath the soft tone was something else. something I recognized from years of conditioning. Anger, impatience, control, tightening. The voicemail ended with, "I know where you are. I'm not giving up on us." The sentence echoed in my apartment long after the recording stopped. I didn't sleep that night. But something inside me clicked. Something the audience always waits for in stories like this. Resolve. Fear can suffocate you, but at a certain point, survival demands motion. So, I filed the restraining order. Courtrooms don't look like TV. They're plain, quiet, bureaucratic. The judge, the clerk, the bailiff, they move like machines in a system that processes misery daily. Laura came with me. I filed the paperwork, signed the documents, swore under oath. I thought that would be enough. It wasn't. The judge scheduled a hearing, and Ryan would be notified. I felt sick as we left the building. "He's gonna be furious," I whispered. Laura nodded. "Yes, but furious doesn't mean powerful. You're shifting the dynamic." "I'm scared," I admitted. "You're allowed to be scared," she said. "It means you're aware." The backlash started almost instantly. My mother called 6 times in a row. I let it ring. On the 7th call, I answered. "Hannah," she snapped the moment I said hello. "What on earth did you do?" My stomach dropped. "What did he tell you?" "He said you filed some kind of legal complaint against him. Do you know how humiliating that is?" Humiliating. Not dangerous. Not necessary. Humiliating. I took a shaky breath. "Mom, he abused me." "You always exaggerate," she snapped. "He said you're unstable. He says he just wants you safe." I closed my eyes. He's lying," I said softly. "He wouldn't lie." And then she said the sentence that every survivor dreads. "You need to stop making things up." The line went silent for a few seconds. Then she added, "He's ruining his life." I ended the call. I blocked her number. A daughter shouldn't have to do that, but a survivor sometimes has no other choice. The next blow came from my sister, an email. Long, rambling, cruel in the way only family can be. It ended with, "You're embarrassing us. Everyone thinks you're unstable. He's been nothing but patient with you. Grow up." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She had chosen her side. 2 days before the restraining order hearing, something happened that snapped the narrative completely open. A coworker at the art shop, Marissa, pulled me aside during closing. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you're constantly waiting for the floor to collapse." I laughed weakly. "That's exactly how it feels." She hesitated, then said, "Hannah, someone came by earlier asking for you." My stomach tightened. "What did he look like?" I whispered. She described him. Tall, scruffy, dark hair, wearing EMT scrubs. My blood went cold. "What did he say?" She swallowed. "He said you left something at home and he was here to return it. He asked when you'd be off work." My chest tightened so fast it hurt. "What did you tell him?" "I said I didn't know your schedule," she said. Then I told him to leave. Her next words chilled me to the core. He smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Of course it wasn't. People like him only show their real smile when they think they're close to getting what they want. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay at Laura's friend's house.
a safe house. I didn't even know Asheville had those. The world has more hidden networks of survivors than people realize. Women helping women, strangers helping strangers. The house was simple, quiet, protected by a coded lock and surrounded by people who knew how to intervene if things went wrong. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. But peace never lasts long when someone is obsessed with rewriting your story. The next morning, everything shattered. The police called. They had picked him up. Not for violence, not for breaking and entering, not for stalking, but for violating the temporary protective order. Apparently, after I filed, the order was processed in the system. That meant he was forbidden from contacting me at all, directly or indirectly, until the hearing. But he had left another voicemail overnight. He had also driven by the art shop again. I hadn't even known. Control doesn't have to be physical. It can be proximity, presence, pressure. The officer said, "We're holding him overnight. You're safe for now." Safe for now. Those words land differently when you've lived through fear. I asked, "Will my family find out?" He said, "Not from us, but restraining order records are public." My blood ran cold. My family, public mirrors, gossip, and a man who believed he owned the narrative. This was no longer about escape. This was about the story being fought over in the courts, in my family, and his twisted version of reality. And I knew part 4 would either be the final unraveling or the moment I finally reclaimed my life from the people who refused to see it. I got there early. Laura came with me. She sat beside me in the hard wooden benches and kept her hand loosely around mine. Not squeezing, not pressuring, just grounding. "You're allowed to be nervous," she said quietly. "I'm not nervous," I whispered. "I'm terrified." She nodded. "That's the honest version." It's strange, sitting in a courtroom waiting to see the person who nearly broke your life open. It doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like being underwater. Everything muffled, slow, too bright, too quiet. Then he walked in. Ryan. Clean shirt, pressed slacks, dark hair brushed neatly, looking like the hero he always pretended to be. He glanced around the room, eyes sharp and calculating, until he saw me. He smiled. Not a warm smile, a smile that said, "There you are. I knew you couldn't hide forever." My stomach twisted. My breath stuttered. Laura leaned close and whispered, "That smile is not confidence. It's panic disguised as charm." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until she said it. The judge entered. Paper shuffled. Voices softened. The hearing began. My name was called first. I walked to the stand on legs that didn't feel like mine. The courtroom was silent enough that I could hear the thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. "Miss Mercer," the judge said, "you are requesting a protective order. State your reasons." I opened my mouth, and for a split second, no sound came out. But then I saw him sitting there. The fake concern, the rehearsed expression, the same face that had hovered over me in 100 moments of fear. And something inside me snapped into clarity. I spoke. Not perfectly, not eloquently, not like a scripted victim reciting polished lines. I just told the truth. The grabbing, the controlling, the surveillance, the intimidation, the physical harm, the emotional manipulation, the missing persons report, the police visit, the stalking, the fact that he came to my workplace and smiled at my coworker like she was part of his plan.
At one point, I said something I hadn't planned to say. I left because I was afraid of what he might do to me if I stayed, but I filed because I'm afraid of what he might do to me now that I'm gone. The judge's pen paused. I continued. My family doesn't believe me. They believe him. They say he's worried, that he's the victim, that I'm unstable. But I know what happened. I know what I lived through. I know what I escaped. I swallowed hard, and I know what he's capable of. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Mercer. I exhaled, shaky and lightheaded. Then it was his turn. Ryan stood, smoothed his shirt, softened his expression. He played the part beautifully. Your Honor, he began, voice low and controlled, this is a misunderstanding. He said I had abandonment issues. He said I had emotional swings. He said I left during an argument and he panicked. He said he only filed a missing person report because he thought I was suicidal. He said he went to my job because he worried she might get hurt walking alone at night. He said I was confused, unstable, overwhelmed. He said he loved me. The courtroom felt cold. But there is something abusers forget. Their performance is polished, but survivors tell the kind of details liars can't invent. When the judge asked him whether he had ever placed hands on me, he hesitated for half a second, just half. Then, only in self-defense, he said. Self-defense. Laura stiffened beside me. The judge looked up sharply. Mr. Halden, she said. Self-defense implies physical threat. Are you saying Miss Mercer physically threatened you? He swallowed. Emotionally, he said softly. That sentence, that single absurd sentence, was the thing that cracked his performance. Not for me. Not for Laura. For the judge. The judge leaned back and said, please clarify how someone can physically harm you emotionally. The courtroom was dead silent. Ryan blinked. And blinked again. He didn't have an answer. Because abuse victims know how violence feels. Abusers only know how to mimic remorse. After testimonies, after questions, after the judge reviewed evidence and reports, she cleared her throat. Miss Mercer, she said, based on your consistent testimony, the documented police contact, and the respondent's violation of the temporary protective order, the court grants your request. My breath stopped mid-chest. A full protective order. 2 years. No contact. No phone calls. No showing up at my work, home, or anywhere near me. Ryan's jaw tightened. His mask cracked for a second. A flash of pure, unfiltered rage. Then he lowered his eyes. He didn't look back at me. As deputies guided him out, I watched him walk away. And something inside me, something I thought was dead, finally exhaled. But the story didn't end there. Not with the court, not with him. It ended with the people I least expected. My family. Because abusive partners aren't the only ones who try to rewrite narratives. Sometimes, the glue holding a lie together comes from relatives who prefer comfort over truth. 3 days after the hearing, my mother showed up at my apartment again. Not ashamed, not apologetic, defensive. She stood outside the building with arms crossed, wearing the same face she used when I didn't clean my room at 14. "Hannah," she said, "this has gone too far." Too far. I replied flatly. The judge granted the order. She waved her hand dismissively. Judges don't always know the whole story. I stared at her. "The whole story?" I repeated. "I told you the story. You didn't believe me." "Hannah," she insisted, "he's heartbroken." I stepped back. Something inside me had shifted since the hearing. Confidence, clarity, or just exhaustion that finally turned into strength. "I'm going to say this once," I said quietly. "He abused me. You can believe that, or we don't have a relationship." Her face hardened. "We're your family." "Exactly," I said, "and you should have acted like it." She blinked, stunned. My mother wasn't used to boundaries. She wasn't used to me speaking without shaking. She wasn't used to me choosing myself. Her lips parted. "You're being cruel." "No," I said firmly. Cruel was watching me break and siding with the person who broke me. She stepped forward. I stepped back. "I'm done. Until you can accept the truth, the real truth, I'm done." For the first time since the entire nightmare began, she had no reply. She left. And I shut the door behind her without crying. Because crying was for the girl who needed their approval. I wasn't her anymore. Over the next few months, things slowly settled. The art shop became my safe place. The Blue Ridge hikes became my therapy.
The women from the shelter became my chosen community, and the quiet in my apartment no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like freedom. Eventually, my father reached out. He apologized, truly apologized. He said he believed me now, that he wished he'd listened sooner. We're rebuilding. Slowly, cautiously, honestly. My sister hasn't spoken to me since, and that's a door I am not eager to reopen. Sometimes healing requires subtraction. The final piece of closure came on a warm spring afternoon. I was at a small cafe downtown, sketching in my notebook, when I overheard two women at the next table whispering. She left him because he was controlling. I heard he tried to contact her through her family. And the court protected her. Good. She deserves peace. They weren't talking about me directly, but they were talking about my story, my truth, and they believed it. Without knowing me, without knowing him, without knowing the years it took for the truth to find daylight. Their belief wasn't validation. It was confirmation that the world was bigger than the people who doubted me, that my voice mattered beyond the echo chamber of a family that refused to hear it, that survivors aren't defined by those who silence them. I packed up my sketchbook, walked outside, and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not because I survived. Surviving was instinct. Pride, because I chose myself. even when no one else did, even when the people who should have protected me sided with the person who hurt me, even when I had to rebuild my life from a single-room apartment in a city that didn't know my name. I survived, and more importantly, I am finally living.